Agents Registration Act is a law that I've spoken about on this floor many times. At its core, the Foreign Agents Registration Act brings transparency and accountability to foreign influences in our politics. I want to make very clear, this act doesn't prohibit anybody from doing anything they want to do. It only requires those who lobby on behalf of foreign governments and their interests to register their affiliations and activities with the Justice Department. This fits in with a law that I try to shortly describe as bringing transparency, and when you bring transparency, you have accountability. While it requires lobbyists on K Street to disclose if they're lobbying on behalf of foreign governments and their interests, it lacks teeth necessary to enforce the intent of the law and its other requirements. That's very much a weakness in a law that goes back to the 1930s, and it hasn't been updated in the last 55 years. Today, I seek to change, once again, that environment I just told you about by introducing the Foreign Agents Disclosure and Registration Enhancement Act. If enacted, this legislation would grant the Justice Department new investigative powers. The bill would increase criminal and civil penalties for violation, and it does this in order to deter abuse of the law. In other words, people not registering when they should register. The bill appropriately limits who in the Justice Department can use this authority, and it provides essential due process protections. In fact, it's based on identical authority in the False Claims Act, which for years has helped root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And the bill tasks the Government Accountability Office with studying whether and to what extent the Lobby and Disclosure Act exemptions to the Foreign Agents Registration Act is being abused. These reforms are the result of this senator's oversight and policy work dating to 2015. These reforms are not in any way partisan. And the last Congress, this was very much a bipartisan bill. This Congress, it seems funny, not a single Democratic colleague would join me and my Republican colleagues in co-sponsoring this legislation, even though the same people co-sponsored it in the last Congress. So I have to ask my Democratic colleagues, what's different now than at the tail end of the last Congress? In December last year, I came to the floor for a live unanimous consent on this very same bill. At that time, I had the support of the chairs and senior Democratic senators on both the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee. Now, what has changed between last December and right now that these same Democrats that helped us aren't helping us on a bill that's the same? Are the compromises that we hashed out no longer relevant now that the Democrats control the United States Senate and, of course, the presidency? Maybe I should put it a little more bluntly. Do my Democratic colleagues no longer care that the Trump administration isn't in power? During the Trump administration, I heard my Democratic colleagues speak loudly about the risk of foreign influence on the Trump administration. We all heard it. Trump, Russia. We heard it all day, every day. Well, I can ask embarrassing things on the other side. What about Biden and China? We all know about the links between the Biden family and Chinese foreign nationals connected to the communist regime, and those links are real and proven, unlike the links that supposedly existed between Trump and Russia that a whole 2 years of study proved were not true. If the Democrats want to be intellectually honest on the issue of foreign influence, they're going to have to face the music on both sides of the political spectrum. I've conducted oversight of the Foreign Agents Registration Act without regard to power, party, or privilege. That means I've done it both when we had Democrat presidents and we had Republican presidents. Also, I raised concerns about the work for Ukrainians by Paul Manafort and the Podesta Group, also involved with the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or maybe they should have been involved with it and violated it. I even raised concerns when the firm behind the discredited Steele dossier failed to register for its lobbying work to repeal U.S. sanctions against Russia. I subpoenaed Paul Manafort to testify at the Judiciary Committee hearing on lax Foreign Agent Registration Act enforcement. I praised Mueller for dusting off the law that had been ignored for so long. I want to remind my colleagues that we make laws to be equally enforced, no matter which party is in power. The Foreign Agents Registration Act isn't a right or left issue. It's about foreign influence, about foreign control, and the preservation of our sovereignty. Without our sovereignty, we fail to even exist as a nation. Now, last Congress, getting back to my attempt to make a unanimous consent request, at that time, Senator Menendez did what he had the authority to do and the right to do. He objected at that particular time, stating that it bothered him because the Foreign Agents Registration Act reform should move through regular order, because that committee, under Republican leadership at that time, did not take up the bill. The chairman then give his approval to it, but obviously didn't get Menendez's approval to it. So Senator Menendez did what he thought a ranking member of the committee ought to do to protect his side of the aisle, and he objected and wanted it to go through regular reform. So I'm waiting for regular reform to happen. I look forward to working with Senator Menendez and the Foreign Relations Committee to move this bill any way they want to move it, through regular order, or like we did last time with having the chairman and ranking member just approve moving it. In fact, some of your members were previous co-sponsors of this bill. So I'm saying to Senator Menendez that members of his committee co-sponsored this bill last time, and I don't understand why they aren't joining me in co-sponsoring it this time, and I'd love to have them do that. The issue with foreign influence on our political system aren't going to go away. In fact, I think we can say they're primed to get even worse. In the meantime, While partisan politics play out, the Foreign Agents Registration Act stands without necessary reform. So I strongly urge my Democratic colleagues to work with me and my Republican co-sponsors to achieve a much-needed, meaningful reform to a very important law that doesn't deprive anybody from making their living any way if they want to. If they want to lobby and influence our government for a foreign country, we accept that. They can work that if they want to. But we ought to know about it. And that's what the Foreign Agents Registration Act is all about, to get this information out so it can be made public, because with transparency, there is accountability. I yield the floor.